Today, if you look at, I was again from a kid's point of view or a teenage point of view, for a child, any non-responsive screen is not working. You take a 2-year-old in your lap and you try and take him to a television set, they'll swipe the TV set because they're used to
Right.
looking at a screen like that. So as they're growing up in this environment, they are looking at on-demand viewing. They're looking at, in their mind, the show they want at the time they want. Now, these will be the adults for tomorrow. The teenagers are already doing the same thing. The youth is doing the same thing. And third, for me, is in this market, it's unique because 4 or 5 or 6 large companies own 90% of the IP. And they have, and these are large TV broadcasters
Right.
as well. And they've taken the call to put a lot of this content out, premium video out, at support in the market. Given the tailwinds of data speeds going down, the mobile penetration growing remarkably, and content available free, ad supported, is making this digital video opportunity a $1 billion opportunity from an ad spend point of view, the way we see it in the next 4 or 5 years. Now that's a large number. To give you context, 4 or 5 years out, the digital video ad spend opportunity will be second largest to the Hindi GECs only. So that is an enormous opportunity from a content owner or content creator point of view. And it's an enormous opportunity to serve those consumers and for brands to come on to.
Interesting. So let's say, Siddharth, from your point of view, when you're not a network-linked channel operator, what do you think are the opportunities more from brands, and how do you segment and target those users as a brand?
Largely, our business is what Gaurav has shared as well, is out and out a first screen approach, which is coming out of mobile. Because we are a premium entertainment company, whatever advertising that we put is extremely, the content consumption is usually premium, which means that we have the ability to real time, through a programmatic manner, share with the brand the values from a content consumption bucket, what is the kind of categories, genres of content that these consumers are consuming, and contextuality coming in. Because this is on mobile, we come to know a lot more about the customer than in television. And that individual contextuality brings this entire piece to the brands, and basis brands' objectives, we have the ability to bring that out as well.
Interesting. So I hear you guys saying that it's going big, it is targeted. Now let's talk about the brand. When do you think OTT will become a significant part of your media plans, and do you see it overtaking traditional channels like TV sometime soon?
Not for the next 5 years at least. I hope I'm not really saying something out of line, but TV still becomes the largest part of our media spend, just given the way the brands are,
Right.
the kind of brands we have, and especially for an FMCG environment. But if we start looking at some targeted brands, if we start looking at brands which are slightly more niche or which have like some kind of an availability limitation, those kind of brands I think would start moving naturally to the OTT platform. So I mean, this year again we are spending a bit on the online video. It has started taking a bit from the TV pie because you do want to reach out to the audience, which is now literally in the cord shaving mode, so they're just not moving to the TV
Right.
at all, and they're just maybe taking subscriptions for the OTT platforms directly. But having said that, that's a very small number.
So you're saying
still.
it's still small and it'll be 5 years before it becomes formidable, or overtakes TV ever?
Yeah, so it becomes formidable. I mean, in markets like US or UK, it is a large part of the
Right.
spends which we have. But in markets like India, where the sheer mass is so high,
Got it.
and I mean, who knows if data becomes free or if there is a lot of free Wi-Fi which happens, then you might see a huge upswing. And
That's,
nobody really saw what Jio would be doing to the...
That's an interesting point of view. Hold on. So, Christo, worldwide, do you see any trends that are kind of contradicting what Bhavna is saying, or anything that you want to highlight?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of user behavior. So I think it's based on your target audience. You might see that, in Generation Z, the adoption will be a lot higher than, Generation X. So I think it depends in terms of who you target and what their demands are, what they want. And I think another aspect it is based on accessibility. So you'll, for example, see in countries such as the US, where maybe internet is a lot more available, a lot more accessible, where the costs have become a lot more affordable, I would say. Then I would imagine that the adoption will be a lot higher.
Sure.
But you'll see, for example, different markets. I've spent most of my career in emerging markets, working for a global tech company in HQ. So for me, it's been very interesting to see the different trends. And at the end of the day, when you look at emerging markets, it's going to be about affordability. It's going to be about accessibility. You've got some markets where smartphone adoption in Africa, for example, is only picking up now. So that will be a barrier that will limit you. Other countries such as Saudi Arabia, for example, they've got one of the highest mobile usage penetration in the world, 80%. So for them, given the access and availability that they have to television in that market, OTT is going to just go through the roof, right?
Yeah.
So it's accessibility and behavioral patterns would be my guess.
Interesting. So when I hear about Geo, what Bhavna said, and what I hear you saying that infrastructure and accessibility will impact, I think the core point which maybe Gaurav you can highlight is how are you planning to monetize it? When do you see that OTT content would be a very significant part of a media mix? It would become a significant part of advertising dollars, and how will you scale it?
So I have a slight disagreement with Bhavna to the point that it's the numbers are small and numbers are niche. I think what happens is what Christopher was saying, that actually look at the target audience. Today, the absolute quantum of viewings we see for our youth shows on Voot is comparable to TV, if not higher than TV, on the same shows. What we see is the viewers coming in, even on GE content, the amount of time they're spending. So we have users coming and spending 50 minutes per day per user, and we know the user, right? So while you have a couple of million users coming every day, or 17 to 20 million coming every month, you know the guys. Now that's not small numbers. The problem we face is that, and to the extent she's right, that all of us have our own data and metrics, and there's no one common measurement. And which is what we're trying to solve with BARC coming out and actually solving for a common industry measurement piece, hopefully soon.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a big game changer for digital video and premium digital video players like us. Because, unlike the US, a lot of the content that you have in the US, which is on digital, is actually behind the paywall. So the ad opportunity on US on this content is non-existent. Hulu was doing some stuff, but Hulu itself has withdrawn that. So the pay market there is far more evolved. The pay market here is going to take a lot more time because TV fundamentally is underpriced on the subscription side. You make $4 or 200 rupees for 200 channels.
Right.
The context of pricing there becomes changes. Now, therefore, we believe that BARC measurement piece will solve one. Second, if you look at individual target groups, youth, kids, even including big ticket properties like Big Boss, for example, the amount of viewing we had on those, and because of exclusive content we were doing on, which is not on television, led to a humongous volume of users. We got about 12 million unique users who sampled Big Boss and watched Big Boss, a large part of it on digital. Now, you can say it's still small compared to 50 million of TV, 70 million of TV.
Right.
But the reality is, you know the user, it's targetable, what you can do with it. The second challenge we face, which has to be sorted out, and I think will be sorted out over time, is that TV itself is underpriced on advertising point of view. Over time, it's been really underpriced, it's not gone up. So in that context, when you want to reach its scale, Bhavna could say that digital comes out to be expensive.
True.
And that's where we have to, and media companies like ours will have to come and give solutions which go TV and digital and in content and so on.
Yeah,
to solve that.
you make a very strong point of view that, content combined with measurement. What's your view, Siddharth? How do you think you will scale monetization of OTT content?
We are actually, basically, we've always been a hybrid as a company. So we've got microcharging in a big way. We basically build the business on the back of mobile charging, which is where 90-95% of values have been created on small ticket size being charged for a whole host of content being provided to these users. Okay, the larger playouts in the earlier years was what percentage the telecom networks would keep and what percentage the so-called content and destination companies would keep. Now that has gone through a massive change. We've been running services outside of India as well, extensively, and we believe that billing interfaces, be it telecom, be it credit card, be it wallets, all of that needs to be made available in a seamless environment to the end user, and you will see consumers moving from an ad-funded bucket into the paid bucket. That's one part of the play. The other part of the play is that we've had ad-funded businesses outside of India where the effective yields on the same content is extremely healthy. Okay.
Right.
In India, there is still small advertising dollars chasing that value. But in markets like the West, that maturity has happened, and there is a sizable media chunk available for mobile and video consumption, and there are measurements out there. That piece, in my mind, again, I also believe it's going to be a lot more earlier than what Bhavna said, will happen here, because if you were to flip this into China and compare China as the media business, the digital media business last year with China was about $24 billion. Okay. In India, we're roughly $1.5 billion.
Right.
Okay. For a GDP, which is technically 2.5x.
All right.
So that is the opportunity, and money will move from other mediums to this, provided we work with brand and the ecosystem to further democratize the entire transparency of data and then being able to measure that value.
Interesting. So you make 2 points here. One, you said is all about data and the transparency of consumption. And second is how payments are evolving. I mean, if there are small trenches of payments which are being available to users, I think those are very valid points in terms of expanding the ecosystem and getting more people to consume paid data. Let's go to Bhavna. I think everyone's putting the spotlight on you as a brand. So what do you think in terms of measurement is the help that you need from these guys for you to have a very scalable system of allocating dollars on TV versus OTT versus any other digital channel? What do you need?
So I think what Gaurav had made a point of saying that digital is, still perceived to be more expensive than TV. And I guess the step which the industry is taking now is getting the BARC system in place. So it will still be some time before it actually gets implemented, and we can see how the incrementality of one medium versus the other is there. And once that comes in and it actually gets everybody onto a common platform, more importantly, so maybe a Hotstar or a Voot or all the Z platforms which are there, it will just help us choose which OTT platform to pick up, just like we do a TV channel. So if I was to pick up a Star versus a Colors versus a Z, and
Right.
here I would have a Hotstar versus a Voot versus a OZ kind of a thing. So I think the common base which will get on, and having it on a panel would help. So that would be something which the advertisers would really be able to.
So you're saying one apple-to-apple comparison mechanism which helps you measure both the
Yeah.
channels in a similar manner.
Absolutely.
Interesting. So let's talk about from a user perspective. Now, I heard Andrea saying that you guys are able to drive offline sales using online.
Yeah.
So how do you attribute, now let's say you got one measurement mechanism between TV and OTT, but still you'll have to make your attributions between, hey, offline purchase happened because of this impression on what I saw on Voot or Hotstar or anywhere else versus on a TV. What are the complexities there?
So I think attribution modeling still has a far way to go, reach in this whole domain, and that's not because of anything else, but the spends on digital and hence split between platforms is so low that how can you attribute what has absolutely happened because of a OTT versus a Google versus a Facebook?
Got it.
Becomes difficult. But then again, I think it is a step in the right direction. We know that from more mature markets, this is what it is coming to, and I think in India it will happen, but it's just a
Sure.
matter of time.
So-
Can I just comment on that piece? I think we should all be cognizant of the fact that I think digital industry is getting victimized for its own benefits of being measured at some point. I think TV is so unmeasured that when we get something which can be measured,
Right.
you want to overmeasure it.
Overmeasure it.
So I think with due respect to the point, I think we need to do common measurement pieces, but attribution levels of digital are so much more than what television can ever do. The problem, I think, is that when you start comparing the two, you're not having a common measurement, the common scale to measure, right? So I think in attribution, in targeting, digital scores
Very high.
millions to one, right?
Right.
The problem is that if you have to move money from A to B, at some point print to radio, radio to TV, TV to now digital, there is a legacy spend which is happening. You're used to a panel of 20,000, 30,000 homes giving you some data. You believe it's true or not true, doesn't matter. We believe it's absolutely right now. That's the only measurement piece we have. So the industry goes by it. As against this, So I think we have to you guys put trackers on every ad. You always do that. You always ever know who the person is or what you can do on duplication there.
So Gaurav, I'll interrupt you here. Let me turn it for you. Now,
Yes.
for an offline business like Reckitt, obviously it's an issue. When I start looking at e-commerce or digital businesses, we know, hey, bang, this guy came from here. This is the customer journey. He saw me first in Wood, then they went to whatever Google search, and then came here, and they culminated purchase. So for us, it's not a difficult issue. Now, I agree that, hey, attribution, and you will never be able to kind of accumulate view through with click through kind of attributions.
Absolutely. Neither on TV nor on digital.
True.
So can I just add to it? So there are certain products which are very high on e-com for us, but what we've actually seen is that offline still drives the e-com sales.
Yeah.
So if I was to do a digital-only plan for some of our devices, it just doesn't work. You have to get offline.
Totally
on
agree with you.
because in India, then the sheer mass is watching TV.
But let me give you three things which will change that. Okay, the reality is today in this country, I think the way we are heading to, if you were to look at, we have scratched the surface on OTT, all of us. Our user interfaces are in English, some Hindi is coming through.
Right.
The next 3 to 5 years, imagine everybody consuming it through their own languages. Consuming, not even though reading, by actually using voice search. Right, as one piece. Second, we have scratched the surface on, again, this by data prices have just now becoming rationalized. We're going to see a lot more rationalization there and offline picking up. Right?
With you. I think the point you're making is customize it for the user and give it the right way.
And
Said you have a point.
Yeah, and Manish, actually, if you ask me, probably we are the only media which can actually personalize to you, personalize to you, personalize to you. Okay, and that power of the medium, we've done it on the web in some form, but on the mobile, it's real. And you're going to see a lot of it. Technically, 48% of India doesn't speak Hindi.
True.
We come, we sit, we talk Bollywood. Correct. But for Hangama, 48% of my business has nothing to do with Hindi. Yeah. Okay?
Yeah.
Regional is absolutely right. The other bit is that there are categories that are already starting to embrace this. So take, for example, mobile devices. Okay? Apple, as an example, has been advertising with us for the last 3 years, and it's a very, very focused form of advertising. Year on year, device by device, we get campaigns out there, and they see that media delivering for them.
Right.
Similarly, for car companies, the financial services has already embraced it in a very, very large manner. Today, if you were to put what do financial services spend on television, vis-a-vis what financial services spend on digital.
Right.
And if you were to further segment it down to what they spend on mobile vis-a-vis pure web, you will see a substantial value towards mobile as the big play.
Interesting. So in terms of, let's say, buying and selling, maybe Krista, you can take that one. Do you see any changes in the way OTT is being sold and bought worldwide versus what you know of in India?
I would say, based on my knowledge of India, this would be a difficult one for me to answer. But what I can say, and maybe if I can just comment, because I've been silent here and I've been thinking, maybe I can add one or two thoughts if that's okay.
Sure.
But I just think, irrespective of the channel that you want to go, if you want to go, traditional television or OTT, I think over the years, the internet has really been underestimated, right? I think if you see how we go from traditional to digital, every time we thought something is just going to be a fad or it's just going to not last, and we've seen this going from consuming newspapers to online, from all of the sudden starting to post content in social media, Facebook, Twitter, these things are taking off. And I know we want to go in as marketers and get spend for spend, but in a sense I agree, you have to look at the ecosystem, you have to look at the entire customer journey, and you need to measure it holistically. I think embracing the digital age, it will be very tricky for us if we try and pin things and compare apples to apples. And I think for brands it's very exciting again that you can go, whether you go traditional or offline or you go digital, you can create different brand experiences. You can really drive deeper brand engagement and at the end of the day use these type of platforms to build different user and customer experiences, and that gives overall value to your brand equity. And I know they will always come to you and say, but what is my return on that spend? But I think you need to look at it holistically. And I think you need to look at these things as complementary. It doesn't have to be rivaled. It doesn't have to be a competitor. So that's just my thought on
No,
that
I think
debate.
that's a valid thought. Even as an advertiser, one needs to look at, hey, what is the ROI out of the media mix that I'm evaluating? If I'm able to get it right and get a better media mix versus any other with the OTT in place, I think that'll help me scale investments here. So one last comment from each of you. What do you think can be a trigger to the OTT ecosystem in India? Anything?
Trigger?
Yeah.
More and more cheap data, if you ask me. That's the fundamental trigger to consumption. Consumers will decide where they want to consume, what
Right.
they want to consume.
Right.
We need to create the least amount of friction for them, which means you get the product out there, you make it easy for them to consume, and they will find what they want to consume out there.
Got it. Bhavna, what would be the trigger for you to spend?
It would be content. It would be engaging content. End of the day, I have to spend where the consumer is. So more
Interesting.
and more consumers who get onto a platform, the spends will logically follow.
Interesting. Gaurav.
Two things really. I think one I mentioned earlier about the fact that you actually go as deep on language and targeting and regionalization as possible. Second big wave we're going to see in the very near future, we just seen the telecom side of it on mobile. We're going to see a huge wave of broadband at home coming and at high speed on really cheap prices.
Right.
Going to change the way you consume TV on television sets.
Interesting.
And that, I think, will be the next big game changer, along with content and regionalization and so on.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you move to passive by but choosing what you want to watch. And I think there I would like to add one point is where advertisers have to think of digital not as performance only, but also for building brands.
I
where
agree.
so far they have not been doing that.
I agree. Is there anything on you?
I think for me, if I were to push this, it would be around adoption rather than trying to monetize it too early on. Because I think if you look at the history of mediums, once you do start throwing a lot of advertising, the consumer kind of loses that power and that authenticity and feel. So I think if you really want to go out and grow a market, like aim for the adoption and then slowly as people make it part of their daily routines, bring in the necessary brands and experiences that you feel will enhance the experience. And not just try and push something, because I think if you look at the Twitters, the Facebooks, my feeling is that as soon as you know who you're being marketed to, there's a sense of authenticity that's being lost.
I think interesting point of view from every one of you. What I hear you saying is, hey, the customer needs the right content. They need an infra push in terms of data to be made available. The brands need measurement to be made available, which is a common platform. And all of us together, maybe as adoption happens more on digital with devices, we'll see growth of OTT significantly as we go forward. Hey, thank you so much for the panelists. We'll open the floor to questions. Yep, the lady here.
Hi, I'm Deepika. I work for Wiki, which is also a VOD platform, OTT. So I really appreciate this talk. A lot of inciting remarks, especially on the Indian market. Right. So my questions for Gaurav and Siddharth. Your AVOD, what is the split between programmatic and direct? And in terms of your programmatic eCPMs, when do you think India will grow to similar levels as other matured markets? It's very interesting that I'm asking this when Bhavna was very skeptical and she said 5 years. So I want to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah. So I think we are 9 months old in the business with about 120 brands on board. What we're seeing is programmatic. We started it about a couple of months back. Already contributes to between 10 to 20% of our total sale. We believe this number will rise dramatically the next year or so. I think the challenge there is that or the opportunity rather we see at 3 levels. One is when you bring brands into the content where you can't do programmatic selling, and you bring sponsorships and all the pieces which you typically don't do on YouTube and stuff like that. Second, I think we have to currently, because we're premium content, we operate at a particular pricing level. We don't necessarily go down to the pricing which some of the other platforms do. So we therefore are careful about how much programmatic do we open to. But we believe that this number in the next year or two will be at least 30% of our overall market, at least, if not more. Keeping aside the branded content and the in-program integrations and sponsorships and all the pieces. Because those get very challenging when you want to do programmatic.
For us, programmatic is now about 6 months old. For the music service, we've actually brought in programmatic. As he's rightly said, we control thresholds of that value. For our international markets, we've got actually 100% programmatic, because the kind of yields that ad dollar is giving through programmatic, even direct sales doesn't have an ability, because you have the ability in the UK to get as high as £20 for a ECPM kind of a play. In India, the programmatic play is so the way we are ending up balancing it, we are balancing it basis what's the effective yield. Because we don't want that yield to drop. It's fine if that ad unit doesn't have, that content doesn't have an ad getting played out. But it's not about filling your entire advertising inventory on the back of only ad dollars being put in. Because then in the programmatic layer, at least from an India perspective, we are just about starting there. The quality of that inventory in terms of the advertising creative itself is usually challenged, and that tends to actually create a lot of consumer backlash and consumer pain, because he's needing to watch that to actually consume your content for free.
Next question. Yep, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Sheetal. My question is that OTT is basically born out of a behavior change, so people wanted to watch video on demand and move from TV to OTT platform. Why is it that brands are still looking at advertising on OTT platforms with the same behavior pattern that they did on TV? So it's interruptive ads that were on TV. So that is a question for you, Bhavna. And just an extension to that for both Gaurav and Sid are, what are brands which are actually OTT platforms? How are you educating brands, or how are you working with brands to change that behavior? So not looking at it from a same lens, because the behavior of the OTT consumer is completely different.
Tough question. I guess for brands, right now, how OTT is, it's seen as an extension of TV. It's really catch-up TV which is there. So the consumers I'm missing out on a TV platform is the one I'm trying to get on to these OTT platforms. So it just becomes an extension of the same advertising dollar being spent. And unfortunately, that's the way the OTT players are also selling it. There is content, there is an engagement, but again, going back to my point, the numbers are so limited right now that for me, the cost of actually spending that money in getting some engaging content to be made and delivered versus putting the same behind my existing advertising, it just kind of doesn't really play out. So we do things for certain brands. We are doing content-led strategies, but then again, OTT just makes it far more smaller in numbers to actually get onto that. But again, having said that, this is right now. We don't know how it's going to play out with the whole data costs coming down and everything. So let's see. And especially for brands like us who have to increase penetration, I really need to get my same advertising message to more and more number of people than the same people watching more. So if like Siddharth had mentioned, a lot of different industries who are spending significant amount of monies, but again, their task is different, and I think for us,
let me add to what Bhavna is saying. I'll wear my brand hat now, than a moderator hat. So when I look at, let's say, plays like YouTube, when, let's say, I was doing a campaign targeting women in India who are interested in fashion. Now, when we went on YouTube, when we kind of figured out, hey, interest in fashion overlap with the food, makeup, raising kids, how-to videos, how to wear a sari, and then we started advertising there, the kind of ROI that we got versus anywhere else was much better. So if you're contextual, if you have the right messaging and the kind of correlation with the user behavior, like in Facebook, you can do interest-based, audience-based, all of that, that works very well. I think it's also the evolution of the advertiser and the brand that you're talking to, and what is their ultimate objective. And for e-commerce, when you're able to make or measure every click to that ROI, I think it's much easier to move forward in that direction. Yeah.
Yeah. So they've answered some parts. I'll give you our perspective on this. I think our story here is to how do you want to build your brand on the digital video medium, and the easiest comparison point is television, but here is obviously targeted and measured. Therefore, I believe that obviously the vanilla inventory, sponsorships, blah, blah, blah will anyway happen. But what you can do with content here and working with especially original content we're creating and the properties we create which are not on television, the brands have a great opportunity to actually engage users at a very, very different level. You build the whole social engagement piece you mentioned about, you then base interest-based targeting, and you have a winning formula. So, and again, I'm not advocating here move all your money from TV to here. I think we have a place in the sun already. It'll grow. But for certain brands, the place in the sun is much larger than what seems to be for some brands. So that's really the story right now, but I think it's looking very positive overall. Great.
We've also seen the kind of video ad tech that's coming in. It's making the same video advertising value do a lot more. And one thing is very clear: the digital destination knows a lot more about the consumer. If that is married to some of this, then the effective value to the advertiser could be a lot more than in any other medium as such.
Right. Any other questions from the audience? Yeah, I'm getting. Okay, one last question. I'm getting indications to wrap up. So, last question there.
Yeah, hi. It's a great panel. Just one question. I read the newspaper on my iPad. I can watch YouTube on my TV. And so the fact is that for the longest time, media was defined by the device that you were using to consume it: radio, print, TV. Now, what's happening is, the question I have is that, this whole debate about TV versus digital, which is better, which is more effective, do you feel the problem really lies in the buying ecosystem? In the sense that, frankly, 10 years from now, the consumer that Gaurav was talking about, the adults of tomorrow, they may not even see these things as different mediums. For them, it's just video or text or animation. So do you think the problem is that the way agencies are structured, and the agencies are the ones who are the brokers of demand, right? The advertiser demand, they still are broken up as TV and digital, and that's why clients also follow that lead. Do you think that's really the heart of the problem, where there is a monetization challenge?
Okay, let me make an attempt at it. So ultimately, what we see, you're right in a way that agencies are broken and they don't think integrated. They're just thinking, hey, TV is separate and digital is separate, and let me sell. And even people who face that is, people who sell it are different. So I think that's obviously a constraint. I also believe that maybe there's very little education which is being given to the client on how to kind of see cross-device attribution, see cross-media attribution, how to measure results. And that's where maybe some of these publishers, I know Google and Facebook are doing a lot around it. You guys can join them. But yes, you're right, education is critical for an advertiser or media spender to think integrated than think in segregated manners. Yeah.
And I think a lot of agencies in India realize that and are now putting in platforms to be able to cross-pollinate each of these medias to absolutely to your, it's a text, it's an audio, it's a video, it's an image. It's those four core vectors. It doesn't make a difference what platform it comes on. It's the core attribution that defines, do I spend 1 rupee on this customer or do I spend 10 rupees on this customer?
Saket, what's scarier is the fact that sometimes not even the same agency. There's one digital agency and one TV agency or whatever it is. Exactly. Right? So that's the scariest point. And I think we really hope, and you bang on, we already hope that changes sooner than later.
Yep. Thank you so much. You've been a great audience, and thank you, panelists. Appreciate it. Thank you.